In today's video, we're going to be having a conversation about alternate art prices absolutely skyrocketing for certain specific sets. Is this an outlier or is this a trend that's going to trickle into other sets with alternate arts? But before we jump into it, as always, we do weekly giveaways. All you have to do to enter is leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We post pre-recorded content each and every week, Monday and Wednesday, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are our Q&A session days. Lastly, if you haven't done so already, highly recommend you check the links down in the description below. We've got two in particular I highly recommend you check out. Patreon, if we do have any open spots available, highly recommend you join the program to get access to Pokemon at wholesale prices. I think we had one spot most recently open up yesterday, and it was filled within like 6 hours. So it's definitely one of those things that it's super high demand. If we have a spot open, you always want to make sure that you take advantage of it by checking in. And then outside of that, if you want to stay up to date on all things PokemartUSA has to offer, or just be a part of the community, links down in the description below for our Discord. But jumping into today's topic. So this one's a little bit of an inspiration from a discussion we had on Tuesday's live stream. So if you don't stop by those, they are running from 12:30 Pacific Standard Time. So if you have the opportunity to check out and have any of your questions answered live, that's usually where I answer all the questions. But someone was saying, hey, Eli, have you noticed the price of Team Up booster boxes? Do you think they're going to go down? I'm like, Team Up booster boxes? I mean, they're at like $1,000, right? We took a look and I was like, I'm sorry, what? They're selling for $1,300 to $1,400? Did I just miss this? Like, what just happened? And then people started saying, if you think that's crazy, look at what's been going on with the alternate arts. And it's crazy to see because I literally stopped looking for like a month, right? And it's insane to see. And to be fair, most of the ones I was following were from Cosmic Eclipse, but to see what has been happening with the alternate arts, just specifically within the past, I mean, just look at the time frame on this. In the past month to month and a half, the price has skyrocketed on this card. So we're gonna break it down. I'm gonna show you guys some prices on eBay, because I saw that Pokedata is not 100% accurate or up to date on their pricing, but we're still gonna use them to take a look at population. But we're gonna look at a couple of cards and we're gonna more or less compare it and say to ourselves, okay, do we think is this a trend? If not, obviously stay away. But if it is there opportunities to be found here, right? Always got to preface by saying this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do your own research and please be aware. The main point of this channel is to make smart financial decisions. And the thing is, as you guys are very aware, I am very much so deeply a fan of investing in sealed over singles, because there is not a floor typically for sealed ultra modern product. Obviously, there is, a possibility for product to go below wholesale, but if, let's say hypothetically, and please understand the context when I say there's typically is a floor. If a new set comes out for Scarlet and Violet, I know what the price is right now for wholesale. It's $95.50 to around $101. If it drops to that price point, then more than likely it's not going to drop another $10 to $20 below that. If it does, I see it as an opportunity. Evolving Skies being at around $400 a booster box is a perfect example of an ultra modern sealed product that I have absolutely no idea in terms of how low it could go if we were to see a market recession happen, if we were to see reprints. It could go to, anywhere. It could go to as low as 200. It can go to as low as 100. I mean, there's absolutely no way of knowing, which is why for me, I like to pick the investments that I believe I have an edge on, because I'm always going to be a lot more conservative when it comes to my investments if there is a potential of a reprint, because anything could happen at any time. But same concept applies for singles, because singles there's not a wholesale price for singles, right? Whatever the market is willing to pay is what they're willing to pay for singles. So just really important that you understand that. I look at these as actually riskier than sealed product or specific ultra modern sealed product that you can get in closer to wholesale for that reason. But now looking at the first card, Latios and Latios. So if we were just going and taking a look at the price of the overall chart, you can see that over time, I mean, if we're talking about realistically, since the start of this year, the price of this card was roughly around $1,150. And if we want to go take a look at where it is right now, we've got recent sales upwards of, a little over $2,000. So the price has basically doubled in the past month to month and a half for this card, which is absolutely insane, absolutely ridiculous to watch. And it just seems like it's going to keep going up from here. Another card that we're going to take a look at, Full Art Magikarp. This was a card that was about $100 to $200 just about a month and a half ago as well. It is now pushing $848. Funny, because we looked at it on Poké Data yesterday. It says it's $343. It is not accurate. You want to look at eBay for the most up-to-date and accurate listings of sales. These are recent listings, so it'll probably take time for them to be added to the system for Pokedata.io to update the accurate pricing, but it's quite significantly different when you see 848 versus 343. So once again, prices are just continuing to go up, 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 and up. Another one I want to take a look at is the Full Art Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia. This is a card that, as you can see, literally at the start of the year, it was sitting at around the, whoopsie, I'm looking at the raw version. It was sitting roughly at around the $270 price point. And now if we go take a look at the card, it's pushing almost $500. So once again, almost absolutely doubled in price. This item is just skyrocketing. So the question we have to ask ourselves, Eli, is this a trend? Is this something that's worth investing in right now? Should I, what are we kind of looking at here when we're seeing this? I think there's a couple of things that need to be taken into consideration when looking at the prices for each one of these specific sets. So a couple of things in particular. One, when we go back and we look at the history of that set, what was the general print run, right? How many cards in that set, when we're talking about specifically sealed or booster boxes, were printed? Did it have a short print? Did it have a high print? What is the demand for that set? It doesn't matter historically what the demand is for the set. It matters what is the demand for the set now, right? And then outside of that is also looking what is the population report for the PSA card itself. I think that those are the three things you really want to look at. And if I'm being honest, from an investment side perspective, although I usually wouldn't look at the first one, I feel as if the general masses of investors, they put way too much emphasis on the first one, and so psychologically it causes them to look at it in such a more scarce way. And what do I mean by this, right? For those of you guys that don't know, Team Up is the set that has the Latios alternate art, and it was an extremely short printed set, right? And so for that reason, when people look at it, they're like, oh, there's a reason why this is a super expensive card. It's because it's super short printed and there's a high demand for it. Obviously, there is a high demand for the set, no doubt about it. But when you go and you take a look at this card and you say to yourself, okay, well, this is a card that has a population of 725. Got it. And this is a card that has a population of 488. Got it. And it's about a fourth the price. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, when you look at pack prices, especially with Cosmic Eclipse being more readily available, but that doesn't change the fact of the matter that, sure, it's more readily available, but that doesn't change the overall population of what's being graded. That would only affect the general raw price. That wouldn't affect the PSA population price, because the PSA population price is just so much drastically lower. I mean, we're talking about 40% lower than that of the Latios and Latios. So this is priced at $500. Right now, it seems like you can get it to as low as $450 if we're just looking at eBay recently sold. So what kind of is that? Are we looking and saying to ourselves that the Latios, there's a misconception because people are just not paying attention to the population report, or they don't care because they love the design so much? I think two things can be true at once when looking at this, but ultimately at the end of the day, when taking everything with a grain of salt, I would like to believe that the Latios and Latios is starting to get to a point of where it's getting drastically overvalued, and because of that, it's kind of dragging a lot of these alternate arts up in value, because people are looking to that card and they're saying to themselves, holy crap, this is an alternate art that is worth around $2,000, $2,200. it's got about a 700. And to put it in perspective too, this is another thing I feel like a lot of people aren't really considering. You might say 700 isn't a lot. Sure, it's not a lot when you're comparing it to amazing rares, which have 7,000, or the Charizard Rainbow from Champion's Path, which I think had like 5,000. But if we look at one of the oldest alternate arts in the Sword and Shield era, if not the oldest alternate art, which is funny to say because it's like 2 years old, right? It's not crazy. But to be fair, Cosmic Eclipse, for those of you guys that don't know, the set came out in like 2019. So this is not an old set. This is a set that's 3 or 4 years old. So it's not like this is an ancient set. Same concept to play. Same thing goes with Team Up. I think Team Up's about a 4-year-old set too. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm a year, it's a year older. But I mean, the point still stands. They're not old sets, right? And so taking a look at another card, Ultra Modern, this is a set that has a population report of 1,094. This is a population of 725. This is only 400 more. This is actually, by Ultra Modern standards, slightly higher population report than Sun and Moon era, and drastically lower than a lot of the product that you see in the Sword and Shield era for population report. And what is this currently priced at? It is currently priced at $229. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, Eli, well, it's comparing apples to oranges because Latios, it's a gorgeous art design and people like Latios more than they like Tyrannitars. Well, I think that's extremely subjective, right? Because if we go and we look at the history of sets, we can see sets that have both Tyranitar cards that are extremely strong performers and sets that are Latios and Latias that are extremely strong performers. You can't directly kind of correlate to say one is more or less going to perform better than the other, because historically, if we look at a lot of the cards, such as, Latios Gold Star, if we look at the Shining Tyranitar, these were some of the best performing sets, but we can't say when you put them both into a set that one is going to be better than the other, because you typically, I just can't think of a set that has both a hyper rare variation of these cards where one was drastically higher than the other, right? And so you're having to kind of compare this from the lens of, okay, well, this is a set that obviously is still Sword and Shield era, still in rotation, still obviously has a 1,094, and the population for this is probably going to continue to go up more because it is still in rotation, versus this is an item that is out of rotation, but the population of this has still drastically continued to climb as the value of this continues to climb, because there's just so much value of trying to send this in for grading. If you can get that PSA 10 and make yourself, at first the raw card was 5 to 6 if you were lucky. It's continuing to climb, but the ratio of, if you can get this to a 10, $2,000+ that's crazy, right? So you're gonna see that population climb for that specific reason. So I'm not saying, obviously, and I hope people don't take this out of context or misinterpret it, because it feels like this happens quite often. I'm not saying that this is a better card by any means than the Tyranitar V, because obviously art is subjective in that regard. But what I am saying is, if I look at this from an investment perspective and I say to myself, okay, well, Tyranitar is a popular character historically. It's not a Charizard level popular, but neither is Latios or Latias. It's just an amazing art design. Kind of like Aerodactyl, from Lost Origin. I am not the biggest fan of that Pokemon, but when it comes to the art design, I have a deep appreciation for the art design, which is why I love it so much. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I don't give a crap about that Pokemon, but the art is amazing. And that's why I think it's going to perform really well, because there's still an appreciation for that. And so that's where it comes into the subjectivity between the two cards, and why, although the price of this item is already showing the precedent that it has with it continuing to go up in price, I think there is going to be some opportunities realistically in the long term for some of these lower population report alternate arts that do have gorgeous designs, because when this card did come out, it was the one card that did stand alone and shine within battle styles. And I think that's another factor that's playing onto this as well, because battle styles, people look at battle styles and they say, ew, battle styles, there's nothing good in that set other than Tyranitar at bust. So when people see that, they have that negative connotation. But for those of you guys that were around during the team up era, that was the exact same feeling. I mean, I feel like there's such a like short-term memory span, or there's so many people that are new to the hobby that don't really realize this. When you go look at Shining Legends, when you go look at Team Up, when you go look at Lost Thunder, there were so many of these specific sets in the Sun and Moon era that during the time were considered absolute bricks. Like, people looked at them and they're like, this set sucks, this set's terrible. Shining Legends, you're talking ETBs at wholesale for some sites when the set was just getting absolutely dumped. Team Up was a set that initially the overall feel for the alternate arts, people just didn't really care. And it's weird to see, because you look at how that sentiment has shifted over time, because there's now an appreciation for their art, and now all of a sudden people act as if it's like the holy grail and it's gold, when in reality time is going to change that, which is what I'm more or less kind of speaking of with battle styles. It just feels like potentially you're going to see history repeat itself. There's a reason why I compare Pokemon Go, the set, to Shining Fates quite a bit. Pokemon Go objectively is a terrible set, but at the time Shining Fates objectively was a terrible set, but still did well over time. Test Tube Mewtwo was considered to be one of the ugliest art designs, and a lot of people absolutely hated it. Same concept applies for the Mewtwo alternate art within Pokemon Go. There's correlations, you can see this in time, and that's why I think it's important that we have conversations about this kind of stuff. But, before I kind of get into rambling about it, the point that I'm more or less making is that, hindsight's 2020. Make sure you don't get tunnel vision and you see these opportunities, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the artwork that's going to shine. Go look at those cards that you say, I love this artwork, I think this is a gorgeous artwork, because that's what's going to matter, right? Machamp, I don't really care about Machamp. Never been a huge Machamp fan, other than the fact that I like to play it in the video game because it was a good Pokemon, right? But when you look at the overall art design of Astral Radiance and how it absolutely skyrocketed because people love the art design of that card, it's, performed extremely, extremely well as a single. You can just keep pointing to examples of these cards that have gorgeous art designs that are time and time again going to perform well. Not to mention the fact of the matter, the Machamp card itself has still performed extremely well for its overall single price valuation. And we're talking about, we're in an era with a higher rate of overall population, both within the PSA graded and then in the RAWs. So that kind of misconception that, just because it's an alternate art in the newer modern set doesn't mean that means that it's going to be an absolute brick. It's not going to do well over time because it's overpopulated. Although that can be true for a good majority of cards, there's always going to be outliers because the demand is going to outpace the overall population that is within the card PSA report itself. So that's something extremely important, once again, to take into consideration. But a couple of cards I also wanted to look at as well is Gardevoir Sylveon GX. This is a card that was selling for about $200 to $250 about a month and a half ago. So it's done extremely, extremely well, once again, in its overall performance. Full Art Greninja. This is a card that was selling for about $90-ish to $100 not too long ago too. So prices just continue to kind of climb for these cards. So the question ultimately is going to be, okay, well, we see the prices for these cards have continued to climb. All these cards that we're looking at specifically are in, obviously, the Sun and Moon era that have been performing well. Do we think it's an opportunity for us to invest in the Sword and Shield era? Or do you think there's an opportunity for us to find some cards in the Sun and Moon era that we could think are going to perform extremely, extremely well in the overall long term and potentially pace up to the value that we've seen with the Latios and the Latios? So for me personally, and this might sound kind of crazy to say, but when I look at a card like the Full Art Greninja and the Zoroark, obviously it is not comparable to cards like the Arceus and Dialga. It's not comparable to cards like the Latios and Latios, but it is still a card that I think will do really well. And, looking at it right now at that $190 price point, I think there's an argument to be made that this card is going to be drastically undervalued. It's going to perform well. Heck, even the full art Gardevoir right now, I think if you can find this, I mean, because these are all marked out prices, right? This is not saying this is the price that it was sold out. These are marked out prices. You're probably talking about this being a card that's sold more realistically in the 350 to like low 400-ish price range. And so for that reason, I look at this card and I say, okay, this is a gorgeous art design. It has both a Sylveon, which we all know evolutions, and it has a Gardevoir that I feel as if just really brings out the vibrancy of a card like this. I look at that and I say to myself, honestly, 350 for a card such as this, when you look and see how things are going, also feel like there's a drastically undervalued opportunity within this card. You know, and then when I move over to the Arceus Dialga Palkia, you know, it's hard for me to say this is priced appropriately. And this is where we start to get into the crazy madness of it all, because I'm going to be wrong, right? I look at this card and I say to myself, yeah, this feels like this is a card that's priced appropriately. I wouldn't pay it because I feel like, if, for me personally, I'd much rather get it at around the 300-ish price point, or the, you know, low 400 price point. But, you know, 500 seems like a fair market value. And I know that more than likely in a month or a month from now, this card is going to be considered an absolute steal if you picked it up at this price. This is not financial advice. I don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, if we're just watching how the trends are playing out, that's kind of how it is. But if I am wrong, I would much rather be more wrong on the Gardevoir and the Greninja, because the prices are, relatively speaking, already so much lower for the alternate art designs. And it's not like you're going to see this card, the Gardevoir, go all the way down to sub $100, $150 for this card. I mean, sure, in theory, if you're saying it's 350, it could go to 250, it could go to 300. But this is the risk that you're taking by investing in singles instead of sealed product. You're talking about playing the game with a higher rate of volatility. But that's kind of what we're looking at right now within Sun and Moon opportunities. But going back to it, this might sound like a little bit of a hot take. I do think the Tyranitar V is a solid opportunity at the price point of, you know, low 200s, high 180, 190 price point. I think this is a card that has an absolutely amazing art design. I think it's going to perform really well in the long term. And if we see this trend kind of trickle into the Sword and Shield era over time, regardless of the population, I think you're going to still see, you know, some strong performers, as long as the Pokemon, you know, trading card game and just collectors stay in the hobby, because it's going to scale, right? The biggest myth that I hear all the time is, well, there's more people hoarding, there's more people that are sleeving and sending their cards for grading, therefore the value of a lot of these ultra modern cards, they're not going to perform well at all. Well, we've seen that fallacy time and time again, as you guys can see with what's happened with Evolving Skies, because there's more people in this hobby, which means there's going to be more demand for specific items. So always take that into consideration when we're talking about cards that have extremely high potential, looking at the history of how similar art designs and cards have performed. But as far as it goes for today's video, that is all. Hopefully you guys found it very informative. Obviously, you know, we talked about a couple of cards in general when it comes to opportunities, but I didn't want to, you know, put so much emphasis on some of these Sword and Shield cards other than the Aerodactyl and the Tyranitar, because I feel like there's still so much speculation going on right now. I'd much rather know the ones that I feel like are going to be a home run long term than try and play the speculation game on certain ones just based off of how they're just currently performing as it stands. But as always, you want to enter into our weekly giveaways, make sure you leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We post pre-recorded content for you to do so each and every week. Lastly, if you haven't checked the links down in the description below, I highly recommend you do so. But that is all for today's video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Until then, I will see you all on Thursday for our live. Peace.